I love stories about grizzled old superheroes, and Samaritan, starring Sylvester Stallone, sounds like the perfect way to scratch that itch. But did it play out in a way that I enjoyed? Stick around and I'll share my thoughts. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. This is my uncut review of Samaritan on Amazon Prime. The synopsis reads, 13-year-old Sam Cleary suspects that his mysterious and reclusive neighbor, Mr. Smith, is actually a legend hiding in plain sight. 20 years ago, Granite City's superpowered vigilante Samaritan was reported dead after a fiery warehouse battle with his rival Nemesis. Most believe Samaritan perished in the fire, but some in the city, like Sam, have hope that he is still alive. With crime on the rise and the city on the brink of chaos, Sam makes it his mission to coax his neighbor out of hiding to save the city from ruin. Okay, so what's the basic tone and vibe of this thing? How would I describe in a nutshell what this movie is? Maybe superhero family drama. I would describe it as maybe the being best suited for an audience of young teens and or their grandparents. And this might be the first movie, at least that I can think of, that falls into the genre that I think we'll be seeing more and more of, especially as my generation gets older and older, of senior citizen power fantasy. I think that the geeks of today that are really into action and sci-fi and video games and stuff like that are going to, as they get older, want to see older actors doing these amazing things, playing superheroes or, being in cybernetic suits that allow them to jump all over the place or whatever. I think those kind of strength, those able-bodied, superpowered body, fantasies are maybe going to start featuring older and older characters and actors as time goes on. And so this might be kind of a moment that I'll want to remember, like, oh, that might have been the first. Anyway, the costumes and sets have a very grounded and realistic vibe, I think, looking at them, but the story and the dialogue to me feel overly simplistic by comparison. The things that people say and the way that they act, the kinds of choices they make given the information they have, it has this subtly unnatural flavor to me, reminding me of a script written for a kids movie. Not full on for kids, it's not that leaning hard in that direction, but it has some of that simplicity to it. And while there is one F-bomb, the violence and overall darkness of the world is toned down to really this sort of mainstream comic book movie flavor, no more serious or weighty than the average Marvel movie, even though visually it has a more grounded and gritty look to it. After some thought, it strikes me as a movie perhaps most intended for grandparents who would know Sylvester Stallone, who'd find it to be a novelty of like this actor that used to be in these action movies back in his and their heyday, seeing him in this kind of role now. So maybe for that crowd and their preteen or early teenage grandsons. I got the strong impression that this movie might have changed a lot in post-production. I say that because there were recurringly key plot points being made by characters who are speaking while the camera is not actually focused on their face, so you can't see their lips moving. This is a device that is used a number of times in movies. You might not be able to, unsee this now going forward if you haven't been aware of this before. But sometimes when they're showing maybe just over the shoulder of the character talking, and you clearly see the face of the person listening who's nodding and reacting to what they're saying, but maybe you notice subtly that the jaw isn't moving quite right with what's being said and stuff. Movie makers will use ADR, this kind of voice recording that's done after the fact, to, reproduce lines that were recorded on locations that were too noisy or whatever. So there's a lot of that going on for those reasons. But also they'll take that opportunity to cram in little rewrites that maybe test audiences, reacted to the original negatively, or for whatever reason they're like, oh, we need to cram in something here. And I felt like there were these expositional moments providing key information about the plot during those kinds of shots. And I'm like, oh man, I kind of wish that they would have risked us not knowing exactly what was going on all the time, and I think I would have been more interested in the movie. On top of that, it's front-loaded with this kind of flashback animated scene giving exposition and background for Samaritan and his history and what happened to him back in the day. it's pretty lengthy. I want to say it goes on for close to 5 minutes. And there's just a lot there that's given. In fact, so much that there's a key turn in the plot later on that I think was supposed to be a surprise. And I saw that, from the very beginning based on what they set up in this front-loaded exposition sequence. And so I really wish the movie had kept me wondering and questioning a lot more, gradually and subtly giving me info along the way. I do think, though, again, it could work for an audience of grandparents and young teens. But since I'm neither, I had trouble connecting with its tone and its writing style. As far as the performances, there is an adult villain. He's the leader of a street gang, and he is written and performed more like a comic book villain. I would almost expect him to have kind of a code name of his own from the very beginning, but he doesn't. He kind of settles into something like that, a more traditional comic book villainy type role. But his performance and his dialogue are kind of overstated. The main child actor works well in many instances for me, but also felt unnatural for some reason when he was smiling, as though perhaps being directed and told to, okay, more, we want more from you on that, kiddo, and so he's giving him a bigger smile or something, but it's not really coming from an emotional headspace like a lot of adult actors who've, been trained and skilled to bring those kinds of expressive moments from a very heartfelt, almost kind of psychological place, whether that's method acting or something else that they're doing, Child actors just typically aren't skilled enough and rehearsed enough, and, they don't know how to do that. And so that's why it can result in some of these kinds of performances moments that I felt like I was getting, where it's like, this doesn't really feel natural to me. It feels like this was a child actor that was told to smile more or to do this more or whatever. And that's typically why I don't connect with child performances. So I'm more sensitive to and less tolerant of that kind of thing in movies. So you can take that with a grain of salt if that's not something that typically bothers you about child actor performances. As far as stunts and visuals go, there's really more gags than action. Moments where, Stallone as a superpowered character will angrily squish something in his hand that is, like a toaster, or punch a hole in a wall or something like that, expressing an emotion that maybe, and when I say gag, it's not necessarily that they're going for comedy. I think probably many times they are, and I just didn't find it funny. But other times I think it's just about expressing an emotion in the moment for the character. And there's definitely a lot more of that than really true action, which is a bit of a bummer for me. There is some CG effects work, but it's pretty minimal. There's one de-aging flashback where they show a younger version of Stallone's character, and that was, compared to the Marvel movies, who have really just pushed that specific effect type forward in the industry so much and done such great work there, and repeatedly done great work doing that. For that to be the standard, and then to see the de-aging here just really not remotely live up to that and really look kind of animated, almost like a video game cutscene, was a bit rough. But it's only one scene, and like I said, there's not a ton of CG throughout this movie. Most times the effects, whether practical or digital, served the moment, in my opinion. So apart from that de-aging moment, I have no real complaints on the effects that except I wish that the budget would have been used more for actual action instead of these gags. As far as themes, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this thing that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? Maybe. I think there are some puzzle pieces there that could be leveraged a little bit more than they were. There's a theme of regret, of fixing what is broken, both practically, the main character, or not the main character, but Stallone's character really has an interest in fixing broken things, and you really, I think, pick up on that being a metaphor. In fact, they might have even kind of made it pretty clear at some point that it's a metaphor for him wanting to fix the brokenness of his own life because of the regret that he lives in. There are some moments where shots will show some things that hint at some form of Christianity, like a long shot that showed like a steeple with big lights emblazoned on it spelling out "Jesus saves." There was a scene with what seemed to be a subtle cross motif going on. Of course, you've got the name Samaritan. All these things kind of hint at potential themes, or at least maybe I would better say influences of Christianity in some way. But I didn't sense a lot of strong statements going on there. Just kind of like these moments, these visual moments and other things, try to go like, that's interesting. I wonder if they're getting at something there. There is a key quote near the end of the movie, though, that I think is meant to be kind of a moral thesis of the movie, and that is good and bad live in everybody's heart. It's up to you to make the right choice. And I really appreciate that. It's not like this mind-blowing philosophical statement, but so often movies will kind of lean into this idea of people being good in their hearts and following their hearts and da-da-da-da-da. So to have somebody say that good and bad live in everybody's heart says that this is written from someone who understands that you can't always follow your heart. You have to rule your heart. Again, he says good and bad live in everybody's heart. It's up to you to make the right choice, not to follow your heart because, according to what they just said, bad lives there too, just as much as good. And so I appreciate that. It's a pretty moderate statement philosophically and morally, but I appreciate that it's being said instead of just the mantra of following your heart that we hear in so many different ways in so many different movies. I would believe, if someone confirmed it for me, that Stallone's faith played a role in some of these elements surfacing. Sylvester Stallone produced this movie. He also grew up Catholic with a reported, as I understand it, return to faith or a more regular church attendance or something along those lines in the 2000s. And in that context, and considering how his Rambo character is also a well-known character who's haunted by past choices and a darkness within himself that he's trying to keep reined in, this would seem to be, in light of those things, another movie that Stallone is perhaps using to explore those ideas. Even if it doesn't make any real statements regarding redemption or forgiveness, Samaritan is a story about repentance, featuring a man haunted by regret and trying to figure out how to turn away from what he's been and done in the past, at least to some degree, and he doesn't succeed at that all the time, but to try and turn away from what he's done in the past and to move forward in a better direction, which is the essence of repentance. All right, now I have no idea what your tastes are in movies, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Peter, skip this one. It's not quite for you. Although, mention it to your father-in-law because he would probably like it and might even be able to use it as something to do with his grandsons out in Pennsylvania. This one's rated PG-13 for strong violence and strong language. And those are all my thoughts for now on Samaritan. As always, I'd love to get your thoughts and reactions in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell to stay connected. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making so much of my content possible. You can get info about the benefits of joining over at patreon.com/Spirit Productions. Then I hope you'll check out the Christian Geek Central podcast and stay connected to all CGC content over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth.
christiangeekcentral.com